The coach, Jimmy Lynam from NBC Sports Philadelphia Sixers pre- and post-game, joins us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Coach, how you been?
Pretty good, fellas. How about yourself?
We're doing well, and last night, boy, was that a product of the Sixers just coming out and playing great, or did the Milwaukee Bucks seem disinterested in being there maybe last night?
We were asking ourselves a little bit of the same question, and I'd say maybe a little of both. The Milwaukee ends up with the Celtics, and I think if you look at the possibilities, I'd much rather take a shot at Boston, a depleted Boston team, rather than have to turn around and come right back here on Saturday at Wells Fargo.
Right. So you thinking that teams right now are more leery of Philadelphia than they would be of Boston?
I don't want to be a wise guy. I think that's a safe assessment. Yeah. Anybody that's watched what's been going on the last, month plus, I think would feel that way.
So, Coach, what has been going on over the last month? What have you seen that has turned this team, when they didn't have Joel, they really struggled. Well, this time they're 8-0 without him. What is going on with this team over the last month and a half?
Well, the team that didn't have Joel was a totally different team from the team you're watching right now. That team did not have Marco Bellinelli. It didn't have Ersan Ilyasova. And it didn't have Markelle Fultz, who's joined the fray. So you add those three pieces to this team. Obviously, it's totally different. And I'd add the fact that, as good as Ben Simmons was from the moment he started playing, he's come at warp speed in terms of his improvement. It's something really I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like the way he's just gotten better and better consistently, virtually every time he's taken the court. So I think when you put all those factors together, as I say, it's a different team.
Coach, how about Markelle Fultz? How would you use him if you were coaching in the playoffs? Would you up his minutes? Would you use him in a similar fashion? Obviously, last night, youngest guy ever to record a triple-double. They've groomed him along, but how would you use him now that it's the postseason?
Yeah, I think, he's certainly going to be a part of it. And I think what Brett will do is he'll give him rope. And on those occasions where Markelle is, responding and playing well, I think he'll have the opportunity with more minutes. Last night obviously was his best effort, but it's an indication of, the type of talent that he has. He's ironically one of the things that really the Sixers have done to me an amazing job of. These pieces fit, meaning if you heard Brett Brown after the game, he attributed. He said, if I was going to try to explain what's happened in a simplistic fashion, he said, we have a style of play that these guys have bought into. And I'm huge on that. You have to have the right system for the players you have. And these guys, to me, Markelle being one of them, they fit like hand in glove. Like Simmons goes on, here comes Markelle. Well, watch. When you watch Markelle, not that he passes, very few, if any do pass like Simmons, but a lot of the things that Simmons does, Markelle does also. The way J.J. Redick plays, here comes Bellinelli, he plays the same way. The way, say, Saric plays is very, very similar. So they've got players that kind of come from a type of a mold almost. And they fit in seamlessly to the system that the Sixers use.
Spending some time with Coach Jim Lynam, NBC Sports Philadelphia Analyst. Jim, do you see the rotations changing at all? Because you've got regular season, and then now you got playoffs. Do you see guys' minutes maybe getting cut a little bit? Will Brett lean more heavily on the starting unit? Do the bench players, do they get the same amount of playing time they got in the regular season? The rotations for the playoffs might shake out different. How do you see them coming out?
Well, I think if you've watched over the last several weeks, it'll be similar. Like last night was a little bit of an aberration. Like Justin Anderson got early call, got big minutes, and had probably the best game, certainly since he's been a Sixer, maybe the best of his NBA career. I don't expect to see him in a steady rotation. Not that he might not get a call, given a certain situation. TJ McConnell, I'm interested to see how they're going to use him, because you won't be able to give him the minutes he was getting back in the beginning of the year now that Fultz is playing the way he is, if in fact you want to utilize Fultz. And I think they certainly will. So there'll be some subtle changes. And I think the biggest thing to look at is Joel Embiid. I don't expect, this is just my guess, he spoke pregame and said, I think he used the word unlikely to play the first game. But that eye looked a lot better to me last night than it did just 2 days earlier. So I think he is making rapid recovery. But having said that, I'd still be a fair bit surprised if we saw him in the first 2 games.
And
my guess would be they'd wait till game 3.
And in typical Joel fashion, he spoke wearing the mask. I mean, that they decided to just leave that on while he does the interview, because that's fitting for Joel's personality, right?
Yeah, boy, that's a great statement. It sure was. I'm laughing as I picture it. Yeah, he just has a knack for kind of seizing the moment in so many different ways, including when the microphone's in front of him.
He sure does. Coach Jimmy Lynam's with us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. What about if they don't have Joel? Does this matchup concern you at all? Whiteside, he's a formidable opponent in the post there. So does this Miami team concern you if the Sixers do not have Joel Embiid, or even if they do have Joel Embiid?
Yeah, no, it does concern me. I don't expect that this will be an easy series, nor should it be. I mean, as well as the Sixers have played, this is. They use. I don't mean to be use terminology, but it's a brand new season. Miami. They played the Sixers. They've beaten them twice. As you say, Whiteside's a very good player. Are the Sixers a better team? Yes. But the better team doesn't always win. 7 games or best of 7 kind of leans toward making it more likely. But the one thing I'll tell you to be careful of with Miami is they have a lot of guys who are like decent players. They have 9 guys average double figures. Are they a great scoring team? No. But when you have that many players who can do damage, last night, by way of example, Wayne Ellington, a Philly guy, he's had a career NBA night for himself, and in the process set a record for threes. Is he a household name? No, he's not Ben Simmons kind of talent, but he's a very good NBA player. They have a lot of them. So as a result, the Sixers will give them full respect and know that they're going to have a battle on their hands.
Coach, before we get too far away from Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, could you make the argument that Ben Simmons is more important to the Sixers' playoff success? Could you subscribe to that argument that he's a little more important to their success than Joel Embiid, even based on the way that he's played the last month and a half of the season?
Well, that he's very, very important goes without question. But to me, it's a bit semantic. I'm not trying to be a wise guy with you. What's it matter who's more important? They're both, vital to the Sixers having a deep, deep run in the playoffs. A healthy Embiid is a must if you aspire to, let's say, winning the East and playing in the NBA championship. So, I just as soon leave it at that, unless you tell me I have to make a choice. I can only play one of the two, and obviously that's not the case.
Is Simmons a good example, though, of how the NBA is becoming positionless basketball? Guys play multiple positions and multiple spots on the floor.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. He, to me, is the epitome of that. That he's capable of playing literally any position, and you can add to the equation in his case, which is what makes him so unique, and he does it without shooting a jump shot. But he's so gifted and talented in so many ways, and I really, in his case, because it's something it's really a throwback, I would start with just his unflappable demeanor, the way he plays the game. It's not about him. He literally could care less, whether he gets a basket. He'd rather you get the basket. Right. He literally would rather give somebody else the basket. And to me, that's so unique And really, I'd like to bang that drum like loud and clear in this day where it's all about me, where there has to be a celebration, a choreographed celebration in many cases when somebody does something. Hey, watch Ben Simmons.
Right. I mean, here's a guy who scores 4 points on 1 of 6 shooting, and you're talking about, man, what an impact he had on a game because of all the other things. But one thing I think we don't talk about him enough is his impact on the defensive end of the floor. It seems like we're always talking about how his intuition and his vision and the ability to pass, but what kind of defender is he? And I think that's something that we don't talk about a lot.
That's a great point. And, again, he goes in lockstep with his teammate, Joel Embiid, who, if you listen to him post-game last night, he aspires to being Defensive Player of the Year. He thinks he deserves the award. I mean, how about these two guys? Teammates, your point guard and your center, and we're talking about two of the best guys at their position with respect to the defense. And Simmons that was one of my, let's say, several reservations when Brett told me that he was going to play him at the point. I said, I'm my one concern. I mean, who's going to guard? And how about anybody? That this guy has committed himself to the challenge, and that's how good he is. He moves laterally so quick, and with that huge size and length, one of the leading, not that if you steal a ball, that automatically makes you a great defender, but it's one of the many components that Simmons brings to the table that makes him really an outstanding and potentially a great future defender.
Jimmy, they also said after the game last night that they thought that Brett Brown should be the coach of the year. Would you concur? I mean, how good a job has Brett Brown done? Because there were some people out there that thought he should be fired. And after some losses this year where they blew big leads and lost to some bad teams out there, but now his players are telling the media, look, this guy should be the coach of the year. Do you agree?
Well, he certainly deserves to be in the conversation. There's no doubt about that. And I think he's thrust himself to the forefront, and rightly so, with this finish. Nobody in the history of this league has ever done what the Sixers have done. I'm not going to forget, but going from 10 wins to 52 wins in 2 seasons, number one, but winning the last 16 games of the year. Nobody's ever done it. That's the first time in the history. That covers a lot of ground with a lot of great teams. And of the teams who had stretches like that, I think there were 4 that ended the season with at least 13 wins. I think I'm right. And 3 of those 4, while not winning the NBA title that year, went on to win it the following year. And I think that's particularly apropos to Brett and this team, that he's built a foundation here with young guys. The 2 top players being the youngest, with the exception, I guess, of Markelle, that's going to go forward for another decade. So to answer your question, yeah, he'd be right at the top of my list, but he has strong competition, as is usually the case. There's a number of guys every year, I think in all sports,
no doubt,
who really do a terrific job.
Yeah. Now, I guess with that, I'll ask you, are you surprised that they are the 3 seed and 52 wins and that they've played this well? Have they exceeded expectations, and how much of that is because of the coach?
Well, the short answer to your question is yes. I sent Brett a text, in fact, this morning, saying I'd like to say that I saw it coming. And as much as I beat this drum as to how good this team could be, I said it in the text, but never in my life could I have dreamed of this. And really, I said, without trying to be dramatic, that he had done, really a tremendous job. And you could make the case that it's the biggest turnaround in the history of the NBA. Mm-hmm. You could make the case. Now, somebody could come up with some counter examples, I guess. But in my mind, it starts with the coach. Now that you're speaking to an ex-coach, but the way that if you simply turn on the TV, you don't have to really, you have to, I guess, like basketball. You don't have to be an expert. But if you watch the way they play a little different than most of the teams. They play similar to Golden State, who's got rings. They play Villanova and the Sixers. You could make the case there's something like similar to the way they play. Not identical, similar. Not by accident. The Sixers pass the ball more than that's fact, than any other team in the league. Now, you can throw 5 young kids out on the court and tell them you want to pass the ball a lot. That's not enough. There's got to be like a scheme, a method to what you're doing. And the Sixers have it to the nth degree. And Brett, he's never varied from that. Whether they were winning 10 games or on their way to 16 in a row to end the season, that was kind of a byproduct of the way we play. Good. And I think that culture is part of the reason they're as good as they are.
Yeah, and it seems that, because, over the last 3 years, there was a lot of people that were critical because that you were the thought was you have a losing culture there, that you're allowing people to accept losing. And it seemed that whatever they did, that they did not allow that to seep into these players.
Yeah, and I can understand that. I'm not going to knock people saying that, but that's spoken from the outside. The fact of the matter is they never had a losing culture. They had a losing record,
right,
not a losing culture, and there's a huge, huge difference. Now, again, the people aren't, number one, they're not there, so it's very difficult. Let's say if you went to a practice, you'd get another whole insight. And the fact of the matter is some people, don't know. It'd be like you asking me to critique stuff about line play in football. I'm a football fan. I don't understand line play in football. They never had a losing culture.
Real quick on Miami, you look at the matchup here. We talked a little bit about them, but, a lot of people out there listening, we asked our listeners the other day, who would you rather face, Bucks, Miami, Pacers, or Washington? Miami was the overwhelming winner. It seems that a lot of people are kind of taking them a little lighter than the other teams. But what about Miami in this matchup with their personnel should worry Sixers fans?
Well, first off, I would say the fans are probably right that if you were going to make a pick, it doesn't work that way. You get you're kind of matched up by where you finish. But I think that Miami, they don't have like a star guy. They don't have a Greek freak type of player, but they're extremely. You're not going to get a better coach team. Spoelstra's as good as it gets. And as I said, they have a lot of good players. There's nobody comes close to having 9 people who average double figures. That means one of the things the Sixers will have to guard against. There's a phrase I used to use about let's not let somebody jump out of the box. And, I'd circle a guy, maybe a bench guy. You think he averages, 8 points a game, but he's capable of getting 25. Miami has 9 of them. Yes, 9 of them. Wayne Ellington's not going to make the top line of a scouting report, but when a team has balanced scoring and they're a reasonably good defensive team, which Miami is,
yes,
they're to be taken seriously. Should the Sixers beat them with home court advantage? Of course they should. But that's not going to be enough. They're going to have to go out and play well. And one of the key things is going to be how quickly they could adjust either to playing without Joel in the playoffs for a number of games or incorporating like a less than 100% Joel Embiid into the fray without it diminishing the way they've been able to play without him.
Now, you're a coach, so I'd like to ask you your opinion on this. You have expectations as a coach coming into the year. You make the playoffs. You've exceeded your expectations as a regular season. But do you now have new expectations, or is making the playoffs a successful year for this team? In other words, if they lose in this first round, are you saying, you know what, it wasn't a successful season?
No, these guys and these coaches, this thing has just started. I mean, yes, you're right that this would have been good enough. And if in fact they went out and thought they played reasonably well in the playoffs, fine. Let's reload and we'll come back and give it a shot starting next year. But no, the way this thing has evolved, this thing has just started. And you hear Brett Brown, he's used it for a month, the word greedy. When things are going like this and you have the talent, and you hear the players say this. I mean, the fact last night, if you watch T.J. McConnell and Justin Anderson I mean, they look like two pretty good NBA players. They can't get in the game for this team. That's how good this team is right now. There are a lot of very, very good players, extremely well coached, and as a unit, they're playing extremely well. So the sky's the limit.
Jim Lynam with us. Jimmy, before we let you go, when you look at that matchup with the Heat, and you mentioned that they're a pretty good defensive team, they're one of the top 10 defensive teams in the NBA. I also go to the Sixers averaging the most turnovers per game. Could that be an Achilles heel or a worry spot that you're looking at when you look at that matchup, that the Miami Heat might be able to force the Sixers into turnovers?
Yeah, that might be the key component to whether the Heat has a legitimate chance to win this series or not. That's a very, very good point. And the Sixers will be aware of that. But I think I don't know how many games we can go back. They put a graphic up last night during this winning streak. So it's at least 16 games. And my guess is a lot more than that, probably more than 25, maybe as many as 30 games where the Sixers have been more a middle-of-the-road turnover team, not the team we watched at the outset of the season who led this league in turnovers. That would be a huge, huge problem. You kind of pump life into the other team if you are so, let's say, careless or loose are the words that Brett likes to use with the ball. You give them easy baskets, and you just take away from, like, the fiber or the fabric of the way you play. And the Sixers have vastly improved, the most improved area of their entire game, without question, the last 30 games, has been their ability to do what they're doing without turning the ball over. And I think it's the main reason why they've turned themselves. They've always been, from the beginning of the year, a terrific defensive team. Right now, they're an offensive juggernaut. They have 46 points at the quarter last night, 80 at the half.
Yeah.
And the seeds of that is don't turn it over.
So, Coach, this is the big one. How far do you have the Sixers going in this year's playoffs? What's the ceiling for this year's team?
Well, anytime I'm asked a question, in or out of basketball, I kind of preface the answer when it's going to be something maybe a little unexpected with everybody's welcome to their opinion. So, in the case of, I call this like a value statement, because I know they have a legitimate chance. I have them in the NBA Finals. Why not? What they can't beat Toronto or Cleveland if in fact they get to the Eastern Final, and they'll be favored in the first two series. They can't beat either of those two teams in a 7-game match. No, you would agree. Sure, they have a chance. Well, guess what? I think they'll do it, and that would put them in the NBA Final.
And that would have you working a lot longer on NBC Sports Philadelphia.
How about it?
Jim Lynam, the coach here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, kind enough to join us as the Sixers get ready to take on the Miami Heat. You can listen to that game here on 97.3 ESPN. Coach, thank you so much.
My pleasure, guys. It's going to be a wild ride. Everybody should enjoy it.